Hello, and welcome back to the British Accent Podcast. I'm Nick.
And I'm Emily. Thank you for joining us today. We have a really tender and meaningful theme to explore. Your journey in English is also a journey in self-compassion.
Yes, this one goes deeper than grammar, pronunciation, or vocabulary. Because while you're learning English, something else is happening quietly in the background. You're also learning how to treat yourself with more kindness.
Exactly. And that part, the emotional journey, is just as real and important as the academic side. In fact, for many learners, the emotional growth is what makes the learning last.
So today, we want to talk about how learning a language challenges not only your memory, but your patience. It invites your curiosity, but also tests your self-talk. And sometimes, your biggest breakthroughs come when you decide to stop being so hard on yourself.
Let's be honest, most people don't realize how critical they've been until they start learning something difficult. And for many of us, English becomes a mirror. It shows us how we react to mistakes, how we talk to ourselves when we're lost, and how willing we are to give ourselves grace.
That's such a good way to put it. Because think about it. How many times have you said something like, "I'm so stupid," or "Why can't I remember anything," after making a small language mistake?
Too often. And that kind of self-talk doesn't help us improve. It only makes the journey heavier. But here's the beautiful truth. Every time you replace self-judgment with self-compassion, you're not just learning English, you're healing a part of your relationship with yourself.
Exactly. You're building a different kind of strength, the strength to keep going even when things feel slow. Even when you're tired. Even when you make the same mistake again. And again.
And that's powerful. Because it means you're not just building vocabulary, you're building resilience. You're learning how to say, "I messed up, but I'm still worthy of respect."
One of the most important lessons I've seen students learn over the years is this: your worth is not measured by how fluent you sound. You're allowed to be proud of your progress without being perfect.
Yes. And even on the days when it feels like nothing is clicking, when you forget the word you just learned, or you freeze in a conversation, you're still growing. Because showing up for yourself, even imperfectly, is an act of compassion.
And compassion isn't just softness. It's courage. It's saying, "I will continue to show up for myself, even when I feel small." It's learning to be your own support system.
And maybe that's the deeper gift of learning English. Yes, it gives you communication. Yes, it opens doors. But it also teaches you how to stay kind to yourself through challenges. And that's something you can carry into every part of your life.
I think a lot of learners feel this silent pressure to always be progressing, to always be better than yesterday. And when they are not, they think something's wrong with them.
Yes. But language learning doesn't move in a straight line. It's more like a spiral. Sometimes you feel on top of things, and then suddenly you forget the most basic word. That doesn't mean you've failed. It just means you're human.
And in that moment, when the frustration creeps in, that's your invitation to respond with compassion. Not judgment. That might sound small, but it changes everything.
It really does. Because you're not just training your brain, you're also retraining your inner voice. You're teaching it to say things like, "It's okay, I'll try again," or even just, "This doesn't define me."
Imagine if every time you made a mistake in English, you treated yourself the way you'd treat a close friend. You wouldn't say, "You're terrible at this." You'd probably say, "It's all right, you're learning. Everyone goes through this."
Exactly. And what's so beautiful is that English becomes the place where you practice that kind of kindness. Where you build that relationship with yourself.
And what we practice in English often spills into other parts of our lives. If you learn to give yourself grace here, you'll find it easier to do it in your work, in your relationships, in your self-image.
Sometimes people think self-compassion is just some soft idea. But it's actually one of the strongest forces you can bring into learning. It keeps you from giving up. It helps you come back after a tough day. It reminds you why you started in the first place.
And it's also what helps you stay you. Because language learning can sometimes make people feel like they are losing their personality. But with compassion, you stay grounded. You remember that you don't have to be loud, funny, or fluent to be worthy of connection.
You just have to be honest. And gentle with yourself. That's how confidence actually grows. Not from being flawless, but from being real, and showing up anyway.
So, maybe today's reminder is this: your English journey isn't just about what you say, it's about how you speak to yourself along the way.
And if you can begin to meet yourself with the same compassion you'd offer a friend, you'll discover that you're already becoming fluent, in more ways than one.
I once had a student who used to apologize every time she spoke. Every single time. Even if her sentence was perfectly fine. It wasn't about her grammar, it was about how she felt about herself.
That's such a common experience. And it's heartbreaking, really. Because so many learners are carrying invisible pressure, fear of sounding wrong, fear of looking foolish, fear of being judged. And over time, that fear becomes internalized.
And this is why we say that language learning is also emotional work. Because you're not just memorizing words, you're trying to feel safe using them. You're trying to believe that it's okay to take up space, to have a voice, to be imperfect.
And that's where compassion comes in. Self-compassion gives you permission to learn with your whole heart, not just with your brain. It reminds you that mistakes don't cancel your intelligence. They prove that you're trying.
And trying is incredibly brave. Especially if you're someone who's learning English while dealing with self-doubt, anxiety, or perfectionism. You're doing something vulnerable. Something that demands courage.
Sometimes people think, I'll feel confident once I'm fluent. But it often works the other way around. You build confidence by learning. By staying present. By surviving those uncomfortable moments, and realizing they didn't break you.
Right. Confidence isn't this magical state that appears one day. It grows from those small acts of self-trust. Like speaking up, even when your voice shakes. Like asking a question. Like forgiving yourself for forgetting.
And those small acts add up. Over time, they change how you see yourself. You stop seeing your English as bad, or broken, and start seeing it as growing. And that shift, just that shift, is the beginning of everything.
Sometimes, all it takes is changing one sentence in your mind. Instead of, I'm terrible at this, you say, this is hard, but I'm learning. That one sentence brings softness. And softness gives you space to grow.
We all want to get better. But what if we could get better without hurting ourselves in the process? What if we let go of the pressure to be perfect, and instead focused on being kind and consistent?
That mindset can change your entire learning experience. Suddenly, English becomes less of a threat, and more of a companion. Something you get to explore. Something that helps you connect, with others, and with yourself.
And when you look back, years from now, you might not remember the exact grammar rules. But you'll remember how you treated yourself during the process. And that, in the end, is what really stays with you.
You know, Emily, something I've noticed is that many learners feel like they don't have the right to be proud until they sound fluent. As if pride needs permission.
Yes, and that's such a painful mindset. Because if we wait until we're perfect to celebrate ourselves, we'll be waiting forever. Growth deserves recognition at every stage, not just the finish line.
Exactly. The courage it takes to say your first sentence, the patience it takes to keep going when you don't see progress, the humility it takes to ask for help, those are all victories. Quiet victories, but real.
And sometimes, the most compassionate thing you can do is to notice those small wins. Not skip past them. Not brush them off. But actually pause and say, that mattered. I showed up. I did my best.
And even when your best doesn't look like what you imagined, when you feel tired or mentally foggy or too overwhelmed to study, you're still allowed to be proud of showing up at all.
Absolutely. Because showing up isn't just a step in the process. Sometimes it is the process. Especially on the hard days. Especially when motivation is low. Especially when your confidence is fragile.
There's a lot of power in choosing to be gentle with yourself on the hard days. It's not weakness. It's not laziness. It's wisdom. Because when you let go of self-punishment, you create a space where you can breathe and keep going.
And I think that's one of the most overlooked parts of learning English, the emotional stamina it requires. You're not just memorizing verbs and tenses. You're navigating shame, comparison, insecurity, all in a second language.
Which is why self-compassion isn't just helpful, it's essential. It's the difference between burning out and growing steadily. Between quitting and continuing. Between fear and freedom.
And freedom doesn't come from flawless speech. It comes from feeling safe in your own skin, even when you stumble. It comes from believing, I can belong here. I have a place in this language.
That's such a powerful belief. And it's one that doesn't need to wait until you reach a certain level. You can choose to believe that today. Right now. No matter how imperfect your English feels.
Because this isn't just about speaking correctly, it's about speaking kindly. And not just to others, but to yourself. Your inner dialogue matters, just as much as your pronunciation.
And when you change how you speak to yourself, everything else begins to change too. You don't rush yourself as much. You don't compare yourself as harshly. You start to enjoy learning again. You start to trust yourself.
And that self-trust. That's the root of so much progress. When you begin to believe that your pace is valid, your mistakes are part of growth, and your efforts are enough, learning becomes lighter. Not always easier, but lighter.
Yes. It's like the difference between carrying a heavy bag alone and carrying it with someone who cares about you. When you carry your learning journey with self-compassion, it doesn't weigh you down in the same way.
And self-compassion doesn't mean you stop challenging yourself. It just means you stop shaming yourself. You can still have goals. You can still aim high. But you approach your growth with respect, not punishment.
There's this myth that being hard on yourself makes you stronger or more productive. But honestly, it just makes people give up. It drains motivation. It replaces curiosity with fear.
Whereas kindness builds resilience. Encouragement makes you more willing to try again. And when you're not scared of failing, you become more open, more daring, more present.
And that presence, being present with your process, with your real self in the moment, is one of the greatest gifts of language learning. It teaches you not just to communicate, but to notice.
To notice when your body tenses up before you speak. To notice when you're too tired to study. To notice when your inner critic is taking over. And then gently say, hey, I see that. It's okay. Let's keep going anyway.
It becomes almost like a quiet practice. Not loud, not dramatic, but deeply meaningful. And the more you do it, the stronger it becomes. Like a muscle.
And it becomes part of how you live your life, not just how you study English. You start responding to everything with more patience, more honesty, more acceptance.
Because the truth is, the way we learn English often mirrors the way we treat ourselves. If we approach it with fear, we reinforce fear. If we approach it with compassion, we grow stronger in ways that reach far beyond vocabulary.
So if you're listening to this and you're feeling tired, or behind, or not good enough, I want you to hear this clearly: you are doing better than you think. And you are not behind. You are simply becoming.
And becoming takes time. It's messy. It's non-linear. But it's real. And it's yours. And that's what makes it powerful.
Sometimes I wish learners could see themselves the way their teachers do. We see effort where they see failure. We see courage where they see embarrassment. We see heart. So much heart.
That's so true. I've had students apologize after sharing the most thoughtful, vulnerable answers, just because their grammar wasn't perfect. But to me, it was powerful. Honest. Human.
And that honesty matters. In fact, I think it matters more than flawless language. Because real connection doesn't depend on grammar. It depends on presence. On being brave enough to show up as you are.
And that's a beautiful goal to have in your English journey. Not just to speak well, but to speak truthfully. To speak in a way that's aligned with who you are. With kindness. With clarity. With heart.
Even on days when your words feel clumsy, or your accent feels strong, or your mind feels slow, those are still valid parts of your learning. Nothing about you needs to be erased to be good enough.
In fact, bringing your full, authentic self to the learning process is what makes your English truly powerful. Not just technically correct, but emotionally rich. Personally yours.
And it's worth remembering, every fluent speaker you admire was once a beginner. Every confident speaker you hear was once unsure. Nobody skipped the messy parts. Nobody was perfect from the start.
Exactly. The people who succeed aren't necessarily the ones who learn the fastest, they're often the ones who keep going. Who rest, reflect, and return. Who give themselves space to be human.
I think that's the real definition of progress. Not how quickly you move forward, but how kindly you treat yourself when things are slow. When things are hard. When things feel uncertain.
Because it's in those quiet, uncertain moments that you're actually building the strongest part of your foundation, not just as a language learner, but as a person.
So if you've been doubting yourself lately, if you've been wondering whether you're doing enough, we just want to gently remind you, you're here. You're trying. And that means something.
It means everything. Because you are not just learning English, you're learning how to stay with yourself. To believe in yourself. To show yourself the same kindness you offer others.
And in the end, that kind of learning never goes to waste. It becomes part of your voice. Part of your story. And part of the strength you carry with you into every conversation, every lesson, every moment.
If today's episode brought you even a little bit of peace, or helped you see your journey differently, we're really glad. That's why we do this.
Remember, your English is part of your growth, but your worth was never something you had to earn. You're already enough, exactly as you are.
Keep going at your own pace. Keep learning in your own way. And above all, keep being kind to yourself along the way.
Thanks for being with us today. This has been the British Accent Podcast.
We'll talk to you next time.